Welcome everyone from my side to this online discussion on building system innovation partnerships. My name is Pirzer. I'm Managing Director at Endeva, and I will moderate today's session. The session is part of a larger online discussion series on the topic of system innovations that Endeva started this year and that we will also continue next year. In this series, we speak about system innovations from different perspectives, from how to collectively design system innovations, interventions, over how to implement system innovations, so how to test and scale system innovations through partnerships, to how we can learn from that and how we can evaluate innovations at systems level. We thereby define system innovations as innovations at systems level where a set of players interact to collectively work towards a desired outcome. So for example, reorganizing a value chain or reorganizing a local support ecosystem. System innovations aim to change, in that sense, the rules of the game. And they aim to change the rules of the game by changing the underlying structures, incentives, or sometimes even the mental models that all determine how we interact in a system. So through system innovations, we aim to consciously design new rules of the game, or we consciously decide how we want to play the rules differently. And with the objective to get to more inclusive and regenerative social and economic systems. Our objective of this discussion series is twofold. First, we want to raise awareness for system innovation approaches and methodologies that can help to create systems that serve people and planet and not exploit them. So this is our awareness raising objective. And the second objective we have is that we want to get to know and connect to people like you. So all the people here in this room, people that are either experts or interested in the topic. So this is our community building objective. And so we also see this session here as an opportunity to start a conversation with you around what works to get us to a world with systems that are more inclusive and more regenerative. Before we start, a few housekeeping rules. So this video is being recorded. And if you do not want to be on the video, please let us know in the chat and then we can figure it out. Please stay muted and please keep your video or turn your video on. Yeah, I invite you to do that because it makes a big difference, as most of you who are experienced with online discussions know, especially for the discussion part later, it makes a difference if we see each other and if we can look each other into the eyes. Even more importantly, I also invite you to listen with curiosity over the next 60 minutes. So what surprises you? What makes you curious? I think after the input that we will get from our panelists, we will have a discussion part where you can join the conversation by asking questions or by sharing your own insights and learnings. If you want to speak up during the discussion part, please use the raise your hand function at Zoom. And also please make use of the chat. So whenever there's a question that comes to your mind or comment to what some of the panelists are saying, please do not wait until the end, but just type it into the chat. And my colleague Samantha will manage the chat, and she will also play back some of the discussion later with us in the plenary. So now I'm very, very happy to introduce the three experts and panelists that we will be speaking with today. All of them add a different perspective, in my point of view, to the topic of system innovation partnerships. So first, we have with us Yvonne Bakken, who is Sustainability Director, Nutrition and Health at dsm-firmenich. So she brings a private sector perspective to the discussion. We also have with us Courtney Robertson, who is Director of Programs and Partnerships at the Collective Impact Forum. And we have my colleague Christina Tewes-Gradl with us, who founded Endeva 17 years ago and is still one of the managing directors. So why should we talk, or why should we build system innovation partnerships? Why are we talking about this topic? If we want to change the way our current social or economic systems work, I think we all by now understand that we cannot do this alone. These systems involve multiple players, complex interrelations, and individual actors usually cannot change dynamics in a system. So from our experience, system innovations require collaboration, and they require collaboration of multiple partners, often from different sectors. So I'm talking about civil society, I'm talking about public sector, private sector. And it requires the key players to interact in new ways with aligned vision for change and with activities that reinforce each other. So collective impact has proven to be a very productive approach for organizing this type of collaboration for systems change. One example that I want to bring you, and this is the last input from my side, then I will start the discussion. One example of such a system innovation partnership that we will probably be hearing more about within the next 50 minutes is Millers for Nutrition, the Millers for Nutrition Coalition. 3 years ago, 7 partners from the public and private sector joined forces to set up what became the largest partnership worldwide in the nutrition sector, with the ambition to reach 1 billion people with nutritious staple foods by 2026, starting in 8 countries in Africa and Asia. From the start, this coalition was designed as a system innovation partnership with the mission to fundamentally change the incentive structures of millers and food processors to fortify staples such as wheat and maize flour, rice, edible oil, with essential vitamins like vitamin A and micronutrients like iron and zinc. And to organize our collective efforts, the coalition decided to follow a collective impact approach. So a bit of background on this. To fight the burden of malnutrition that is globally affecting over 3.5 billion people, food fortification, so putting essential vitamins and micronutrients into staple foods, so into foodstuff, is mandatory in 143 countries. The responsibility to fortify lies with millers and food processors. So they are responsible of putting the micronutrients, the vitamins into the food. However, currently millers have very little incentives to properly fortify. And especially in countries with high malnutrition rates, governments have little capacity to control and to enforce fortification. So the stick is sort of missing. On the other hand, consumers have very little awareness around the health benefits that fortification can bring them. So they also do not consciously decide to purchase a fortified product over a non-fortified product just because it's fortified. So there's also no carrot, basically, right? So carrot and stick are both missing. Instead, millers currently compete with each other in a very low margin market. And every additional cost, even the relatively small additional cost of fortificants, so of the micronutrients and the vitamins, is a competitive disadvantage to them. So we see a situation where despite fortification being mandatory, few millers adequately fortify staples. The objective of Millers for Nutrition is now to fundamentally change this by changing the incentive structures for millers to fortify. Instead of a race to the bottom, we want to see a race to the top where champion millers that adequately fortify generate reputational and business benefits from that fortification, and in return inspire other millers to follow. Over the last 3 years, the number of partners of the Millers for Nutrition Coalition continuously increased. Over the past 6 months alone, the coalition welcomed over 400 new Miller members and is currently working with a total of 540 millers and food processors. And without getting too excited, one of the founding partners of Millers for Nutrition is dsm-firmenich. And with that said, I now invite Yvonne to share a few more insights and her perspective on the coalition. But before that, Yvonne, please say a few words about yourself, about your organization, and your personal touch points with the topic of building system innovation partnerships.
Thank you, Christian. And hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. Thank you also to Christian and the Endeva team for inviting me today. So my name is Yvonne. I am Group Sustainability Director, Nutrition and Health, so quite a mouthful. I work for dsm-firmenich, and for the ones who don't know, dsm-firmenich is well, it used to be DSM and Firmenich, and we merged a year and a half ago, and we're innovators in beauty, health, and nutrition. And we're what a so-called business-to-business company. So we produce ingredients. So many of you might have not seen us because we're not on the front of packaging. But we really work at the crossroad of what is essential for life, desirable for society, and sustainable for our planet. And our core purpose is to bring progress to life. We're a science-based company, and that also means that innovation is key for us. And we have a desire to also work on global challenges or support or contribute to solving global challenges. But we also recognize that not a single organization will be able to do that alone. And we need to work together. So we work together with both partners and with customers. And I think, well, for me, I've been involved in partnership work for the last seven or 8 years of my 12 years in dsm-firmenich. And there's been a lot of different types of partnership work as well. So we've been partnering with the UN World Food Program for more than 17 years, which was maybe not as a starting point as sort of a system change type of partnership, but I think it became so it evolved into need because of a need. So it really came into a sort of a scientific partnership where we had knowledge of how to improve the food basket. But it went much further to recognize that the problem is even bigger than what the World Food Program can reach through their beneficiaries. And we agreed we need to reach also the ones that won't benefit from the direct solutions from the World Food Program. And that's where it translated also into looking more into how do we change the system? How do we make available solutions like large-scale food fortification? So what Christian was mentioning around adding essential nutrients to staple food across the world, also beyond the ones that are getting support either through social safety nets or the UN. And I think that's also changed a bit of the approach, both on how we partner, how we look at sort of cross-sector collaboration, and also add more of the ecosystem partners into that collaboration. I think also as a company, we also do more of these sort of linkages with sort of industry organizations like also the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the World Economic Forum. But I also think what Christian mentioned also on the Millers for Nutrition is quite unique in the sense that it's bringing together key competitors for a joint goal in a pre-competitive space. And I think that's quite unique, but also has quite a few challenges that I'm sure we'll get into a bit later.
Thanks, Yvonne. Yeah, that's a great segue into my first question, basically, to you. How did you experience the evolution of Millers for Nutrition now? Because, you know, we started 3 years ago in 2021. Now it's 2024. What was challenging, basically, on that? You already started touching on it. And how did you see these challenges being addressed? And also, maybe something a little bit personal from your perspective. What successes do you already celebrate from a dsm-firmenich perspective?
Thanks, Christian. So indeed, I think it started off 3 years ago with a lot of excitement and sort of, we can really bring all of these organizations together. And that's already sort of a wow feeling that we're doing something new, something innovative. But I think it also starts in every relationship. It's exciting at the start, and then you really need to get to know each other. And I think maybe that's part of the challenge. Often in partnerships, we talk about trust as something that is important, but it's maybe not considered as something that you also actively need to build. And I think part of the process where also someone like Endeva has played a critical role in also allowing us both to create a space for people to sort of voice opinions, voice concerns, and to slowly get to know each other. So I think, especially in the beginning, the evolution was more of what does we might have a shared goal, but we might all be interpreting it a bit differently. So even from different companies, different organizations, it's almost like you speak a different language. So building trust is not only sort of building that relationship, but it's also almost building the same language. I think from a dsm-firmenich perspective, we have a lot of experience in partnering, but not all the partners in the coalition was maybe used to partnering in this way, and especially in a pre-competitive space with our main competitors was also new, I think, to us. I think we've often partnered with NGOs, with UN organization, and I think it was different to come into a setting where even, even sort of increasing the pie, increasing business was even the end, is supposed to be the end result. And how we go about that. So we're supposed to increase the pie. We're all supposed to get a piece of that pie, but we're not discussing that in any way. And I think maybe sometimes that's a bit difficult to then it's sensitive and you can feel that there is sort of a tension and then to also still be able to address that. And I think to have someone like Endeva that's been more of a neutral party has been extremely important, that we've been able to almost go as someone that we could complain to, say, but we're not feeling heard or we're not feeling seen or we're not actually addressing the issues that we need to address. Also allowed for a bit more of that open space, that you brought us together in a physical setting where we actually met in person, I think played a huge part in the beginning to really also recognize it's not only about sort of company profiles, it's individuals, it's people, and we're doing this together as people, and creating a team across organizations has been very important. And I think part of the challenge I also think is the sort of the timelines around it. I think especially private sector is pushed to move fast. We need to report on quarterly results, and coming together with sort of an ambition like we have in the Millers for Nutrition Coalition. It's a long-term objective. We haven't been able to crack it in the sort of the many years that we've been working on large-scale food fortification. So obviously this will also take some time, but continuously having this sort of we need to create wins, I think is a challenge. And then at the same time, I think what we are celebrating as a success is even that we managed to come together as competitors, as sort of as an industry group to work on something collectively for public health, which is obviously the main goal of fortification. You're supposed to increase public health. And I think that we're finding, well, that means that we all need to have better quality solutions and that we're coming back to some of these core discussions. I think that's already seen as a success. And I think even that we've created traction within leadership, I think that's also something that we really see as a success of this coalition.
Thanks, Yvonne. I have one more question for you, and with the request to respond in 1 minute, because the time is running. Bringing it back to the topic of system level interventions. From your experience, M4N, but also other partnerships that you were involved, how does this ambition to innovate on the system level influence the partnering approach?
I think it's a bit different in the sense that there's not only you have to think of a bigger ecosystem. It's not only like a bilateral partnership. It's not a bilateral conversation. And system means that it's also need to be sort of future-proof. So you need to have a certain amount of agility in your approach. So even though you have sort of a set end goal, it doesn't mean that the set solution looks exactly the way that you started. So to have some of that agility, having that open mind, be able to listen also to the partners around the table, but then also to be able to sort of change according to how your settings might change. I think that's different to food systems, and then be ambitious enough to sort of tackle a food system challenge, and then still be concrete enough to have a roadmap that you can actually work with. Because I think sometimes in the food system discussions, it gets overwhelming because it's huge. And then you need to break it down to make sure that you focus on the things that you as partners can actually influence and then move from there so that you capture some of the successes a bit earlier on.
Thanks, Yvonne. That's really, really insightful. Thanks a lot for sharing. And we might also come back to it later at the end in the discussion part. So to you audience, if that triggered some curiosity or so, some follow-up questions, just type them into the chat or write them down, and we will discuss them later. Thanks, Yvonne. I would now like to invite Christina to share some insights on how Endeva, as one of the organizations that has been tasked to design the Millers for Nutrition Coalition and that is now facilitating the coalition as part of the backbone team, how Endeva, or basically what methodology Endeva used to facilitate that collective impact with a theory U approach. And Christina, before you do that, please also tell us a few words about yourself, about Endeva, and about your touch points with the topic of building system innovation partnerships.
Yeah, thank you, Christian, and thanks, Yvonne, for your perspective. I was listening with a lot of curiosity and picked up some good keywords, hopefully for the discussion later, and a lot of things that I also have in my short input. So yes, you already said it in the beginning, Christian. I founded Endeva already 17 years ago. And what we do is facilitate system innovation really throughout the whole project cycle, from design to implementation and then also evaluation, all very heavily infused by a theory U methods approach, for those of you who are familiar with the theory U work. So really trying to bring the whole person into the room and establishing connection and relationship. And on this project, I've been the director from the beginning. So I had the privilege to be part of this journey over the last 3 years, and I really enjoy the opportunity to reflect on this a little bit today. But I'm mostly looking forward to the conversation part, because I saw in the chat that there are quite a few people who are experts in developing partnerships. And so I'm going to share a little bit about our method, and I'm curious what you all have to say and add and share. This is really meant to be a space of connection, and also hope to connect with some of you after the session. So as Yvonne also shared, I think this Millers for Nutrition Coalition is quite special, not just because it's a private sector-led coalition, but because it brings together competitors in a narrow space, in the space of food fortification, and probably the key competitors in a way. We were looking at this a little bit awkward situation for collective impact initiatives, where there's quite some distance between the people who want to move towards a collective goal together. Actually, really physically, if I think about the first meeting, Yvonne, we had, people were really standing apart and careful, not just because of looking at the other as competitors, but in the space there's also a concern around antitrust issues. So let's avoid collusion and not appear like, we're setting prices here. So both of these themes are very present in this coalition. And as you also said, Yvonne, over time, we really grew into a team, and trust, I think, is a big asset of the coalition right now. And I have a few slides that I want to share just to show you what's the methods background and how we facilitated this progress. And let me know if you see the slides.
Yes, Christina. And just to tell you, you have 5 more minutes.
Oh. Okay, yeah, I'll be quick with the method, but I also want to give you a little experience. So very briefly, what we do when we facilitate these kinds of partnerships is that on the one side, we have the collective impact approach, and that's why I'm super happy to have Courtney speak after me and also provide your perspective as a collective impact specialist. So we use the collective impact framework for the organizational development. We have a plan where we want to go. So most of you will know these 5 conditions for organizing collective impact initiatives: a common agenda for change, shared measurement and data, mutually reinforcing activities, so figuring out which partner will contribute what part and how to coordinate around that. Open and continuous communication inside and outside, and a backbone coordinating organization, which in our case, or the case of the Millers for Nutrition initiative, is TechnoServe, who is holding kind of the secretariat of the initiative. So this for us was from the beginning really a clear guide. These are all the components that we need to bring into place. And then on the other hand, for designing the process, we use the Theory U methodology. So it's a methodology that has been developed mainly at MIT initially. Otto Scharmer is a key name, and others have contributed. And really, so you see these 5 movements that guide the design of a process, and we use it also for every session. The key is this idea of coming with an open mind, but also an open heart and an open will. So bringing all these 3 components into the process in order to be able to move into the desired future. And I'll give you a little taste of what that means, because it sounds very conceptual and maybe a little bit weird, but yeah, it's actually quite simple. So what it meant for this particular partnership, Millers for Nutrition, is that, yeah, from the beginning, in terms of collective impact, we had this blueprint in a way to structure the initiative. So that felt great, because actually partners came together with a huge kind of common purpose. We want to fix food fortification, but not a lot of, conceptual clarity on how to approach that. So that was really co-created over time. So there was a lot of insecurity in terms of what are we doing here? And that framework gave us a lot of security that, yes, we have a plan, and this is a framework that has been proven and that we can rely on. And then we use the Theory U, as I said, as an idea for the whole process, but also for every individual on-site and online workshop. And I think there, this aspect of having a clear purpose and showing up as whole persons enabled over time the strong team spirit and motivation to overcome challenges. And since I only have 4 minutes now, I'll be super quick here. So what we've learned so far after these 3 years, and what we see is that clarity was super important. The clarity of the collective impact framework, the clarity on the antitrust front, what we can talk about, what we cannot talk about, and also documenting everything and making sure what we agreed really, is kind of solid. And then also connection made a big difference. So building this connective tissue over time also enabled us to sustain difficult phases. Yvonne, you also said 3 years is a very long time for a company to be engaged in just creating a partnership and then hitting the ground. So resilience, I think, is one of the key outcomes from investing also in this connective tissue. And then finally, I also want to highlight the role of competition. I think it's so healthy to have this competition in the coalition, because it really provides energy and drive. And in the end, what we want to do is create a better market, a more transparent market at all levels, at the level of the supporters and the level of the millers, to, in the end, provide a better product to the consumer. So that's very brief, and I hope we can get into more detail later on. So the essence is really marrying the collective impact with the theory U approach. Since maybe some of you are new to the theory U approach, I wanted to give you just a very short experience of the difference it makes to have this presencing moment in a process. And I want to invite you to this little experiment right now, how we can use the presencing approach and intuition to deal with complexity. I think, when we talk system innovation, we talk complexity, and what's daunting and what's challenging is to face complexity. And the beauty of the theory U approach and the idea of bringing us whole people into the room is that we can touch on different competencies that we have as humans. We have this front part of the brain that is very good at processing language or numbers, but unfortunately is quite bad at processing complexity. And then we have the back part of our brain, our intuition, like the older part of our brain, that's super good and quick at processing complexity. Maybe some of you have read Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. So we're tapping into the fast part of the brain when we're using intuition to address complexity. And can I do the experiment, Christian?
Yeah, go ahead. Please.
I thought, maybe you have something that is complex that you want to do with others, some challenge, some goal that has a certain degree of complexity. So maybe you can look around and see. So just a little thought experiment. Is there something that you'd like to push forward, but you're kind of held off by the complexity with it? Too many people, too many perspectives. It's kind of unwieldy, and pick a challenge like that. It could be from your work, political, your community, neighborhood, or even just your next holiday with a group of friends. Something that you can just now look at for the next 3 minutes or 4. And I'm looking at the people I can see to see if you've got something in your mind. Great. Okay, then we get ready by just getting grounded and just sitting comfortably on our chairs. So take a good seat and a deep breath. So time to relax. If you want, you can, like me, close your eyes for this little mental journey and sense into your feet. The earth carries you. Sense into your body. Is there some tension you want to relax right now? Maybe roll your shoulders or your neck or your face. And then sense also into the space above you, that space of infinite possibility. And then with another deep breath, I invite you to picture a door to a room. In that room, there are all the people that are involved in that challenge or goal you want to address. So I invite you to open that door and step into that room. And just look around. Who's there? And what's the dynamic in the room? Are people in groups, by themselves? What's the atmosphere in the room? And once you've done that, you can take the next step and approach one of the people in the room. And don't worry, they don't see you, you just see them, so you are invisible. You can walk up close to one of the people in the room. It doesn't matter who, whoever you're interested in right now. And you can observe that person, their posture, their face. How do they look? What can you read out of them? How are they here in this room? And what brings them into the room? What's the motivation of that person? What's that person hoping for? And when you see that motivation, that hope, I invite you to send that person your support for what they're here for. I support your motivation. And from here, just sense into the room again. What's your sense now? Do you feel your objective is more achievable now? Do you think it's more viable to achieve that shared goal or to tackle that challenge? Has anything changed after your observation of that one person? Yeah, and that's the end of our little experiment here. I invite you to come back with another deep breath. And let's see what we do with that in the discussion.
Thank you, Christina, for guiding us through that exercise. So just for you who are in this call now, we are now at the bottom of our U. So we were just in the presencing, and now from here on, it's straight up. And yeah, I would love to now welcome Courtney Robertson to this discussion. I'm very, very pleased that you, Courtney, can be with us today because probably there's no one better than you that can bring reflections from a collective impact perspective into this discussion. But before you do that, could you also, as the others, very quickly, briefly say a few words about yourself, about the Collective Impact Forum and your touch points with system innovation partnerships?
For sure. And thank you all so much for having me. And Christian, you put a lot of weight on me. I don't like to use the word expert, but what I say is we learn a lot from the individuals who show up to our programming and to the individuals who we're blessed to work with more intimately, whether that be through our coaching or through learning communities. So we're always learning how people are, interpreting the approach to collective impact, how it's showing up in their work and what the challenges are. So I like to say that we enter this space as humble learners, not necessarily experts, but deeply appreciate you all having me be a part of this conversation. So as Christian mentioned, my name is Courtney Robertson, and I serve as Director of Programs and Partnerships with the Collective Impact Forum. We are a partnership between the nonprofit social impact consulting firm FSG and the Aspen Institute Forum for Community Solutions. So I like to think of them as mom and dad, and we live with mom, is how I typically describe that to folks. And we essentially are a resource to the field of folks who are doing place-based, equity-centered work. And a lot of the folks who tend to show up in our work and who we tend to support are doing work in a more hyper-local sense, if you will. So typically at the neighborhood, city, or county level. But we do see a lot of folks who have statewide collaboratives and national collaboratives who are also looking to shift and change systems and do work at the population level. I will say that the work that the Millers for Nutrition is doing is the first, at least that I've witnessed, where it's multi-country and being led backbone by the private sector, which is very different and a huge part of what attracted me to the work when Christian initially reached out well over a year ago now. And so this to me is really fascinating, right? That one, the private sector would say, step in and say, we actually want to collaborate, right? In the spirit of competition, because it's not to say that competition doesn't exist, right? Where we typically see folks show up in this work or in the nonprofit sector or in the government space, right? And we know that there's tons of competition for resources, et cetera, in the nonprofit space. But really like coming together to say, we're doing this and we're still competitors, right? But because we want a better world, right? And I think about the work you all are doing, right, is really addressing food insecurity, right? And so we collectively want to make sure that no one goes without, right? And I think that speaks volumes to the values and the type of companies that you all are and you have in that space. And so again, we are a resource to the field. So we show up in that role in a number of ways, from offering workshops, webinars, coaching, and TA. We also put toolkits, articles, all those things out into the field. So really trying to uplift learnings and put those back into the field so that folks have what they need to do their work the best way that they can. And then I also mentioned that we have a podcast, which was one of our first entry points with the Millers for nutrition work. So we do have a podcast where we're uplifting work of practitioners in the field, mostly in the US, but from around the world as well.
Thanks, Courtney. And it's just to say for all of you in this call now, I think we will start the interactive discussion part now. So I also, please reflect, share your own reflections, questions, learnings that you might have from your own experiences in facilitating partnerships. Do that in the chat or raise your hand and speak up. And while you do that, Courtney, I have one more question for you to basically kickstart that discussion part. So from your perspective of collective impact partnerships, would you say that all collective impact partnerships, or that collective impact partnerships in general, aim for system innovation or look at the system level? And if not, what differences can you observe in those that do? So which methods, have you seen that work well from your experiences to facilitate something or like an intervention at system level?
Sure. Thanks for that question. So I will say one, yes, very explicitly, right? In the collective impact definition, we talk about folks coming together, right? Whether, there's organizations, government, private sector, community, et cetera, are coming together to advance racial equity and doing that by learning together, by aligning their actions to shift both population level, but also systems, right? Is really explicitly what this work is about. And so that's often when people come to us and say, we're interested in this approach, right? And I think oftentimes folks just think about like, we're just bringing people together to work on something. But we're like, this work is actually in service to this larger thing. And some people are like, whoa, I don't think we're ready to get there, right? And so yes, that should be a part of the work, but that's not always the entry point, right? One of the very explicit conditions, if you will, around collective impact, and more specifically, as you think about equity, we really push people to think about both the programs and services that they're offering, right? Because folks need those now, right? Like people don't have 10 years to wait for us to shift systems, right? Like I need food now, or I need shelter now, et cetera. And so definitely focusing on the quality of the programs and services that are being provided, but also thinking about system change. And that I think is where not a lot, but some of the challenge I think comes in for collaborators, because folks have often been very programmatically focused, right? And so it really does require a shift in how you think about the work and really using that program level work to identify what are the gaps, right? Either in systems or in services or things that we're noticing, right? As we're bringing together a number of service providers, right? Like what are some of the common challenges, right? And are those systemic challenges, are those things within our control? And if they're within our control, how do we shift those ourselves? And then how do we collectively push the system to change? And when we talk about systems change, here at FSG in the Collective Impact Forum, we specifically talk about 6 conditions. So we talk about shifts in policies, shifts in practices, shifts in resource flows, shifts in relationships and connections. So how are systems and people connected and working together? Shifting power dynamics that might show up in both in the collaborative spaces, but also just in how people interact on a day-to-day. And then at the deeper level, right? Like how are we shifting the mental models that people hold around a particular issue, right? And so we invite people to think about, based on your work, your community, your context, what needs to be your entry point, right? And for some folks, we have to really get people to rethink how they think about opportunity youth, right? Because right now, folks are blaming it on them and not thinking about the systems piece. So we really have to do a lot of work around the mental models for us to then get a lot of those policies and practices shifted. And then for some other folks, right, it might be we actually need to change practices and policies so that we can then force people to rethink how they work together, how they think about the issues, et cetera, right? So there is no, right or wrong way, if you will, of approaching it, but really doing a diagnosis around your work and the systems that your work exists within to say, what are the things that are enabling these conditions, right? And then what are the things that are, sort of prohibiting or like causing these issues over time, right? And then what can we do as a collective, right? Who are the people? I appreciate Christina, that exercise, because when you said open the door, my first thought was, why is the door here, right? Like, why isn't it just open for people to be able to come and go? And then my second thought was, there were faces where I couldn't make out a face, right? Because there are missing people, there are missing voices from the conversation. And I think that, and when you think about collective impact in that approach and thinking about system change, it's about the relational piece. So Yvonne, I appreciate you lifting that up, right? Like that's critically important to the work and how well folks can work together. And if you're not doing that type of work on the front end, it becomes really, really difficult and challenging on the back end because people haven't built authentic relationships and know each other sort of beyond organization and role, if you will. So it's that piece, right? But it's also continuously interrogating who's at the table and who's not at the table, right? How does that need to shift over time as our work shifts, as our strategy shift, et cetera, as we're learning, right, and iterating on the work that we're doing? How are we thinking about the folks who are contributing, not just, from a very transactional standpoint, right, but really thinking about how are we bringing people along in this process and really valuing, right, lived experience and lived experiences? How are we valuing the folks, right, who bring that research and that data, right, and sort of bringing all these people together to make this beautiful gumbo, if you will. I don't know a lot
Thanks,
about food,
Courtney.
so for those are the things, that I would say.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I want to use the remaining, 12 minutes to open up the discussion. And please feel free to join our conversation here. Please raise your hand. If you can't find the function at Zoom, just unmute yourself and speak up. Share your own experiences, ask questions, whatever comes to your mind.
Well, I'm wondering if when organizations come, I'm thinking about what Courtney just said about some organizations are ready to plug into thinking at population levels and at system change levels. Others aren't, and the work is to bring them forward in what they're most motivated by to these other points. And I'm wondering how much work can be done or is being done with the organization itself, because sometimes the organization itself isn't doing many of these foundational approaches within their how they treat one another, how they work together, how they vision, and whether working with an organization as a prerequisite to moving to the population and systems level mindset, what goes on there. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Other comments, questions? I would probably collect a few before we respond.
I have a question about maintaining commitment and energy from all the partners consistently. As you mentioned initially, there's excitement and everybody's interested and energetic about the issue. You've been doing this for 3 years now. How do you keep all the partners as engaged now as they were when the initiative started?
And partners change, huh? I mean, focal points change also. I think that's another very important topic. Maybe quickly responding to that, Christina, do you want to take it? And maybe Courtney, you want to respond to the other question that Susan raised? Or I don't know how you guys want to do it.
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead, Courtney. Take the
I
first.
can quickly respond to Susan's question, and that's often the case, Susan. So I'll name that, and I'll use my time working in a backbone as an example. A lot of the work that we did when we started the partnership was actually educating people on like what it is we were trying to do, right? Because you're asking people to show up and meet and do work in a way that's very different from how they've done it traditionally. We typically come to a meeting, you get information, and you may or may not do something with it, and then you show up to the next one. And what this approach really calls for is like we're aligning our work. We're setting a shared strategy, right? We're then implementing those strategies. We're bringing back what we're learning, right? And we're iterating on that. And you have to have people, right, who have decision-making power, who have the authority to say, yes, my organization can do this. No, my organization can't. And so a lot of it, I think, is setting the foundation. So like helping people understand what is collective impact. When we say systems change, what do we mean by that? And not everyone is going to be engaged in all of those strategies or all those pieces of work. And that's totally fine as well as not expected, right? It's really based on the mission and the work of your organization. Now, there should be things that shift about how people work back at home. So, for example, a lot of our partners weren't, data wasn't a huge priority, right? In the sense in how we were using it. So, using data to understand the challenges, using data to set plans, using data, right, to like learn from what we were doing was not a way in which people were operating. And so we spent a lot of times in those collaborative meetings, like essentially supporting people to do that month by month by month, year over year. And then it came to a point where folks were like, we actually need someone at our organization who focuses on data and who can support our team, right? It's great to get support from you all, but we now see and understand the value in doing and using data in this way. And we want to make sure that we have a role that's dedicated to that, right? So that's an example of like really, and it takes time, right? It takes years to get people like really comfortable with it, get people using, getting people to interrogate it, and then say, we see enough value and understand enough value in this to make sure that this is a part of our organizational culture if it's not. Right. And so I think that's the biggest piece of the work is like essentially meeting folks where they are, having people understand, right, who should be a part of those conversations. I may not, as a person who focuses at the program level, right, may not necessarily be the best person to like be thinking about the systems work, but I can definitely contribute to it, right? Because I understand what's happening at a programmatic level and what those challenges are, right? But it might be the ED or some director level person who steps in and says, we're actually going to support in thinking about what this systems change work looks like, right? And make sure that we create feedback loops so that we're understanding what's happening on the ground and what those real challenges and issues are.
Thanks, Courtney. And Christina, could I ask you to be quite short in your answer that we can get another round of questions? Thanks.
Yep. Although I would also be curious to hear what Yvonne has to contribute on that question from the dsm-firmenich perspective. So Tracy, you asked about how do you sustain support over time, and we both already said that's tricky, you know, with a corporate perspective and the 3-year design phase. I think the key to it was leadership commitment, really from the highest level. That's something that, and somebody asked, how is this funded? So it's really important to acknowledge the super important role of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in this, who not only funded, but also made sure that the CEOs sign up to this for the long term in a way. So there's actual, you know, signed commitments to support this partnership. And this is kind of enacted and reenacted on an annual basis with C-level meetings where C-level executives of those partners show up and restate their commitment, and that can then, you know, trickle down in a way into the organization. So even if focal points changes, the commitment of the organization is crystal clear. I think that was the key enabler of sustaining the commitment. But Yvonne, maybe also your 5 cents there.
Yes, I think it's also important to keep a few sort of milestones. So what you can have that overall goal at the end, but that you capture some progress throughout so that there's some kind of, even if it's low-hanging fruits, but that there's a few sort of successes as you go, that you're seeing slowly something improving, and that you capture and celebrate that, because that creates a bit more of a, oh yes, this is why we're doing it, and this is why we should keep on doing it. Because if you're only working towards that end goal and you're not seeing anything, then it's difficult to keep that sort of enthusiasm and the traction. So I think the more, and I think we've had now this year a lot of these sort of launches in the country that has sort of created a bit of that, yes, in this country now we're kicking off, but then that we're slowly also checking in, are we doing the right things? Are we having the same priorities? Are we doing the right activities? And that it's not as a set in stone at the beginning, that you can't change activities as you go. I think that's also important, that there's moments to reevaluate, are we doing the right things to get where we need to go?
Perfect. Thank you, Yvonne. I think this also has to do with, of course, the proactive learning, right? I mean, this is something new, as Courtney already said. And I think partners in this partnership also put a focus and emphasis on the element of learning, and to proactively build that in. Like, we have so many hypotheses here. What incentivizes millers? I mean, we didn't even talk about this now, right? Like, how are we changing incentive structures? I think there are a lot of assumptions that we can now test, because we are running all these little experiments. And the idea is obviously to scale this beyond 2026, because we want a successful initiative that is there to sustain.
And maybe just on that, Christian, because
Yeah.
I've always appreciated your efforts on saying it doesn't need to be the maximum, the perfect solution. It just needs to be the minimum viable solution to just
Yes.
get going. So don't make it perfect. Just get it to almost ready and just get going, so that at least you have something to improve.
Safe enough to try. That's how we call it. Is it safe enough to try? We have 3 more minutes. I also don't want to overstretch this. Very quick question, looking at Samantha. Is there anything super interesting, relevant from the chat that you want to share in a minute?
Yeah, thanks everyone for participating well in the chat. I think the main point that we haven't that could maybe use some more reflection even is how to withstand turnover in organizations. So I think this question really touches on like baking this mindset into the core of organizations. So it's not just there with one person, but actually continues and is like sort of a core part of its functioning. So if anyone has any reflections on that, otherwise, thanks everyone. I'll keep engaging, so keep adding to the chat as well as we go.
Perfect. So I would then like to use the last 2 minutes for a very short checkout. So maybe we start with you, Yvonne. What are you taking away from this? What was most curious for you to hear in this conversation? Just one sentence, please.
Well, I'll try to keep it short. I think actually taking a moment like this, so thank you, Christina and Christian, for even inviting us, but taking that moment to reflect sometimes, taking a step back and recognize where are we at, and also recognize, I think, even the progress that has been made. Sometimes we're so focused on the end goal that we forget the successes along the road.
Thanks, Yvonne. Christina.
Yeah, I underlined from your input, Yvonne, the word agility. I think that's a nice and challenging idea when you talk about system innovation partnerships, because indeed you have to be agile and respond. And we just touched on the issue of learning and seeing this as an experiment. And at the same time, you want the security of a roadmap. So that managing both, I think, is a very interesting space for us as facilitators, how to navigate that, how to maintain the agility or enable the agility by also providing a clear roadmap, but being free to adjust that roadmap over time. I think that's a super interesting space.
Thanks, Christina. And Courtney, one sentence.
One sentence. So going back to Christina's activity, when she asked what's happening in the room, how are people situated, I actually saw a bit of chaos, and that's good, right? Because this work isn't linear and it's not perfect. And so what I would leave you all with is that collaboration can be beautifully chaotic, and that's okay.
Thanks, Courtney. Yes, thank you all. It was very exciting. I really enjoyed this 60 minutes, and I find it always fascinating how much you can learn and do in 60 minutes only. So I will also leave you now just with one word that it would be wonderful to stay connected. So you can both stay connected with what's happening at Millers for Nutrition. You can stay connected with what we are doing as Endeva, the other like this. As I said in the beginning, it's a series. So if you want to join an upcoming online discussion, stay tuned. Next one will probably be around designing system innovations and how to do that collectively. So yeah, follow the work and stay connected also between you guys. And I really, really hope to see you again at a different occasion. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great rest of the day, or a good start into the day for those who have been joining from the US. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you,
Thank you
Yvonne.
all so
That's
much.
great.